6 prophets, 1,840 followers. Every promise of paradise ended in the same place: a bag, a fire, a cup. My name is Blackwell, and I have spent the last 4 years inside the archives that survived these stories. Police photographs that should have been destroyed, autopsy reports that read like inventories, audio tapes that end mid-sentence. What you are about to hear is not a documentary about belief. It is a forensic catalog of what happens when one voice inside a closed group has no opposition. Marshall Herff Applewhite was 65 years old when they found him sitting upright on a small twin bed inside a $5 million mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California. He was wearing a black tracksuit. He was wearing brand new black and white Nikes. He had a $5 bill and 3 quarters in his pocket. There were 38 other bodies arranged the same way. Same tracksuit, same shoes, same $5, same 3 quarters. A square purple cloth lay neatly folded over each face. The deputies who entered the house first walked back out into the driveway and stopped speaking for almost a full minute. Applewhite was the son of a Presbyterian minister from Spur, Texas. He was born May 17, 1931. He sang in a choir. He directed musical theater. He taught at the University of St. Thomas in Houston until he was fired in 1970. They official each other in a previous lifetime. She told him they had been sent here together. He believed her. By 1975, they were calling themselves Bo and Peep, then the Two, then Doe and T. They told their followers that the human body was a vehicle. They told them that an extraterrestrial spacecraft was waiting in the heavens, and that to board it, you had to shed the vehicle. They drove around the American West, holding meetings in motels and college lecture halls. They told people to abandon their families. Hundreds of people did. Bonnie Nettles died of liver cancer in 1985. Applewhite was alone with the doctrine. He did not stop. He moved to the internet. He built websites. He hired his followers out as professional web designers. They called the company Higher Source. They paid the rent on the Rancho Santa Fe mansion that way. In the autumn of 1996, the comet Hale-Bopp became visible to the naked eye. An amateur astronomer named Chuck Schrammick claimed there was a Saturn-like object trailing the comet. The claim was nonsense. The photograph was a lens artifact. Applewhite watched the broadcasts. He sat his 38 followers down in a room. He told them the spacecraft was inside the comet's tail. He told them the time had come. They filmed farewell videos. The videos still exist. You can watch them. The followers are calm. They are smiling. One woman thanks Doe for showing her the way. A young man with glasses says he is excited to begin the next level. They look like people about to go on vacation. The deaths happened in 3 waves over 3 days, between March 24th and March 26th, 1997. The mechanism was deliberate and clinical. Phenobarbital crushed and mixed into applesauce or pudding. Vodka chased after. A plastic bag placed over the head and secured with an elastic band. The first wave consisted of 15 members. They were assisted by the next group, who tidied the bodies, removed the bags, and folded the purple cloths. The second wave repeated the procedure. The final 2 members removed the bags from the second wave and then went themselves, without anyone left to remove their bags. Applewhite was found in a bag that had not been removed. The deputies counted 39 bodies, 21 women, 18 men. The youngest was 26. The oldest was 72. A woman named Rio D'Angelo had left the group 3 weeks earlier. He came back to the mansion on March 26th because Applewhite had mailed him a videotape and a letter. He found the bodies. He filmed them with a camcorder before he called the police. The footage exists in the San Diego County Sheriff's evidence locker. The arm patches on the tracksuits read, Heaven's Gate Away Team. The team had already left, in their minds, days before the bag came down over their faces. They believed the ship was already there. The ship was a comet. The comet was a piece of dirty ice and gas. It is in the Oort cloud now. It will pass close to Earth again in the year 4385. There will be no one waiting on it. Joseph de Mambro called it a transition. The bodies in the Swiss chalet called it murder. He was a French jeweler from Pont Saint-Esprit, born August 19, 1924. He had a small criminal record for fraud. He had a long obsession with Rosicrucians, Templars, and the spiritual aristocracy of medieval Europe. He believed he was the reincarnation of a 14th century Templar Grand Master. In the 1970s, he started a small esoteric foundation in Geneva. He met a Belgian homeopathic doctor named Luc Jouret in 1981. Jouret was charismatic, tall, handsome, a public speaker. De Mambro was the architect, Jouret was the face. Together they founded the Order of the Solar Temple in 1984. The order recruited from a specific demographic. They wanted people with money. They wanted civil servants, doctors, journalists, a mayor of a small Quebec town named Robert Ostegui, a vice president of Hydro-Quebec named Robert Falardeau. Members paid initiation fees. They paid for ceremonial robes. They paid for swords for ceremonial robes. They paid for swords engraved with their initiatic names. De Mambro told them they were the spiritual elite of the Western world. He told them their souls would be transferred at death to a planet revolving around the star Sirius. He told them this on stages, with audio cues and flashing lights, and a sword called Excalibur that he claimed to have unearthed himself. By the early 1990s, the order was failing. Members were leaving. A former Quebec member, Tony Dutoit, accused de Mambro of using projected holograms to fake the appearance of spiritual entities during ceremonies. De Mambro's son, Elie, made the same accusation. The order's finances were collapsing. De Mambro had Crohn's disease. Jouret was being investigated by Australian authorities for the illegal purchase of firearms. De Mambro decided the time had come for the transition. On October 4, 1994, Tony Dutoit, his wife Nikki, and their 3-month-old infant son Christopher Emmanuel were found dead in a solar temple chalet in Morin Heights, Quebec. The infant had been stabbed 50 times with a wooden stake. De Mambro had decided the child was the Antichrist. Police later determined the killings were carried out by senior members on de Mambro's order. The next day, October 5th, fires broke out in 2 locations in Switzerland. In Chéry, in the canton of Fribourg, 23 bodies were found in an underground chapel covered in red and gold robes. They had been arranged in a circle, feet pointing inward. Most had been shot in the head. Some had plastic bags secured over their heads. 25 more bodies were found at Salvan-Granger-sur-Salvan in the canton of Valais. They had been drugged, then shot. Then the chalets had been set on fire by remote ignition devices. De Mambro and Jouret were both among the dead at Salvan, 48 bodies in one night. 3 of them had been killed in Quebec the day before. The Swiss authorities at first called it a mass suicide. The autopsies disagreed. Most of the victims at Chéry had been shot in the back of the head. Some had defensive wounds. Some had been bound. The Swiss prosecutor reclassified the case as a combined suicide and homicide event. The senior members had killed the doubters. The senior members had then killed themselves. The order did not end in 1994. On December 16, 1995, 16 more members were found dead in a forest clearing in the Vercors Mountains in southeastern France. They had been arranged in a star formation with their heads pointing inward. Most had been drugged and shot. 3 of them were children. Then on March 22, 1997, the same week Heaven's Gate was dying in California, 5 more Solar Temple members died in St. Casimir, Quebec. They burned their house down with themselves inside it. The total reached 74. De Mambro had told them they would awaken on a planet revolving around the star Sirius. The autopsies showed they were drugged first, then shot, then burned. There is no record in any astronomical catalog of any planet around Sirius capable of receiving them. Credonia Muirinde said the Virgin Mary spoke to her. The Virgin Mary asked for a locked church. Muirinde was born in 1952 in southwestern Uganda. She had been a brewer of banana beer. She had run a small bar in Kanungu town. Her business failed in 1988. That same year, she announced that the Virgin Mary had appeared to her in a cave in the Nyabugoto Hills. The Virgin gave her instructions. She found a former Catholic schoolteacher and politician named Joseph Kibwetiri, who had also claimed visions. They merged their stories. They founded the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God in 1989. The movement preached strict observance of the Decalogue. Members were forbidden to speak. They communicated by sign language. They were forbidden to have sex. They wore green, black, and white robes. They sold their property and gave the proceeds to the leadership. They moved to a compound at Kanungu, near the border with the Democratic Republic of the Congo. By the late 1990s, the membership had grown to several thousand. Kibwetiri predicted the world would end on December 31st, 1999. The world did not end. Members began asking for their property back. Kibwetiri postponed the apocalypse to March 17, 2000. Members were told to attend a final celebration at Kanungu. On the morning of March 17, 2000, more than 500 people gathered inside the church at the Kanungu compound. Witnesses outside the compound reported they had been served a meal of beef and soda. Then the doors were nailed shut from the outside. The windows had already been boarded up the day before. Sulfuric acid and gasoline had been stored against the inner walls. The church was set on fire. 530 bodies were recovered from the building. Most were unrecognizable. Many were children. Then the Ugandan police searched the other compounds owned by the movement. At a property in Buhunga, 55 bodies were exhumed from a pit latrine. At a property in Rugazi, 155 bodies were found buried under a freshly cemented floor. At a property in Rushojwa, 81 bodies. The total reached 778. The bodies in the latrine pits had been there for weeks before the fire at Kanungu. They had been strangled and stabbed. The Ugandan Commission of Inquiry concluded that the Kanungu fire was not a mass suicide. The leaders had been preemptively murdering the members who had asked for refunds for months before the church burned. The fire was the final cleanup. Joseph Kibwetiri's body was never identified. Credonia Muirinde disappeared. Interpol notices remain active to this day. They were last reportedly seen in Kinshasa. The Ugandan investigation reclassified it. Not suicide, murder. The leaders walked out of one of the largest mass killings in modern African history and were never seen again. He was half blind. He claimed he could levitate. 12 PhDs followed him into the subway with sarin. Chizuo Matsumoto was born March 2, 1955, in Yatsushiro, Kumamoto Prefecture, Japan. He was the fourth of 7 children in a family of poor tatami mat makers. He had partial blindness from infantile glaucoma. He was sent to the Kumamoto Prefectural School for the Blind, where his partial sight allowed him to dominate fully blind classmates. He extracted money from them. He left the school with a fortune by their standards. He was rejected from the University of Tokyo. He took the name Shoko Asahara in 1984 and opened a small yoga studio in Shibuya called Aum Shinsen no Kai. He renamed it Aum Shinrikyo, the Aum Supreme Truth, in 1987. Asahara published photographs of himself appearing to levitate. The photographs were taken at the apex of small jumps from a cushion. He told followers he had achieved enlightenment in the Himalayas. He told them the apocalypse was coming in 1997. He told them only members of Aum would survive. He attracted a specific kind of recruit, not the desperate, the accomplished. Aum membership eventually included graduates from the University of Tokyo, Kyoto University, and Waseda. Among them were doctors, lawyers, physicists, a heart surgeon named Ikuo Hayashi, a particle physicist named Hideo Murai, a chemist named Masami Tsuchiya, who synthesized the sarin in a hidden chemical plant inside the Aum compound at the foot of Mount Fuji. Aum entered politics in 1990. They ran 25 candidates for the Japanese Diet. They received less than 1% of the vote. Asahara concluded the democratic system had rejected him. He decided to destroy it. Aum's chemists began producing sarin, VX, and biological weapons. They attempted to release botulinum toxin and anthrax in central Tokyo. Both attempts failed because the strains they had cultured were not virulent. They moved to chemical weapons. On June 27, 1994, Aum members released sarin gas in a residential neighborhood in Matsumoto, Nagano Prefecture. They were targeting 3 judges who were about to rule against Aum in a property lawsuit. 8 people were killed, 500 were injured. The judges survived. The Japanese police initially blamed a local resident. Then, on March 20th, 1995, 5 Aum members boarded 5 different Tokyo subway trains during morning rush hour. They carried plastic bags wrapped in newspaper. The bags contained liquid sarin. They punctured the bags with sharpened umbrella tips and got off the trains. The chemical spread through the cars. 14 people died. 6,200 were injured. Some of the survivors are still receiving medical treatment 30 years later. The Japanese police raided the Aum compound at Kamikuishiki. They found the sarin synthesis facility. They found the VX. They found the LSD lab. They found a Russian MiL-17 helicopter. They found a holding cell. Asahara was found hiding in a small, concealed room behind a wall. He had 8 cassette tapes, 10 million yen in cash, and a sleeping bag. He was tried for 13 separate criminal counts. The trial lasted from 1996 to 2004. He was sentenced to death by hanging. The sentence was carried out at the Tokyo Detention House on July 6, 2018. 6 other senior Aum members were hanged the same day. 6 more were hanged 3 weeks later. The members who released the gas in the subway were not failures. They were valedictorians. The man who pierced the bag on the Hibiya line, Ikuo Hayashi, had been the head of cardiovascular medicine at the National Sanatorium Keiwa Hospital. He surrendered. He testified. He is serving a life sentence. He has spent the last 3 decades writing letters of apology to the families of the victims. He renamed himself David Koresh. He took the 7 seals. He took the wives of his own followers, including the children. Vernon Wayne Howell was born August 17, 1959, in Houston, Texas, to a 14-year-old mother. He was raised by a grandmother. He was dyslexic. He was bullied in school. He memorized the Bible by listening to it on tape. He could quote, by his late teens, almost any verse on demand. He joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church and was disfellowshipped for inappropriate contact with the pastor's daughter. He drifted to the Mount Carmel Center near Waco, Texas in 1981. Mount Carmel was the headquarters of a small Adventist offshoot called the Branch Davidians, founded by Benjamin Roden and led at the time of Howell's arrival by Roden's widow, Lois. Howell took control of Mount Carmel through a combination of religious argument and armed standoff. By 1990, he had legally changed his name to David Koresh, David after the king of Israel. Koresh, the Hebrew name for Cyrus the Great. He told his followers he was the Lamb of Revelation. He alone could open the 7 seals. He told the men of the community their wives now belonged to him because he alone could produce the children of the kingdom. He took multiple wives. The youngest documented was 12 years old. He fathered at least 17 children inside Mount Carmel. He held Bible studies that lasted 19 hours. He stockpiled rifles, AR-15s converted to automatic, grenades, and a .50 caliber Barrett. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives executed a search warrant at Mount Carmel on the morning of February 28, 1993. The raid was leaked to a local television station the night before. Koresh was warned. The agents arrived to find armed resistance. 4 ATF agents were killed. 6 Branch Davidians were killed. The FBI took over the next day. They surrounded the compound. They cut the power. They played loud sounds at the building 24 hours a day, including recordings of Tibetan chants, dental drills, and the cries of dying rabbits. The siege lasted 51 days. 21 children were released during the siege. 84 people remained inside. On April 19, 1993, the FBI began a CS gas insertion at 6 o'clock in the morning. Tanks punched holes in the walls of the compound. Tear gas was sprayed inside. At 12:07 in the afternoon, fires broke out in 3 different locations inside the compound simultaneously. The wind from the prairie fanned them. Within 40 minutes, Mount Carmel had burned to the ground. 76 people died inside. 25 of them were children. Koresh's body was found in the communications room. He had a single gunshot wound to the forehead. His chief lieutenant, Steve Schneider, was beside him with a similar wound. The autopsies of the children later showed that some had died from gunshot wounds and edged weapon injuries before the fire reached them. Koresh had promised the children they would meet him in the kingdom. The autopsies showed many of them did not have to wait for the fire. 909 people drank from the same vat. 304 of them were children. James Warren Jones was born May 13, 1931, in Crete, Indiana, to a disabled World War I veteran father and a working mother. He was a strange child. He held funerals for dead animals. He preached to children in his neighborhood from a platform he built in his garage. He became a Methodist student pastor at 20. He left Methodism over its racial segregation. He founded an independent congregation in Indianapolis that he eventually called the People's Temple. By 1965, he had moved the congregation to Redwood Valley, California. By 1970, he had 10,000 members in San Francisco and Los Angeles. He was endorsed by the mayor of San Francisco. He was photographed with Rosalind Carter. He was appointed chairman of the San Francisco Housing Authority. The People's Temple looked, from outside, like a progressive interracial church doing real social work. They ran soup kitchens. They ran nursing homes. They marched for civil rights. From inside, it was something else. Members were required to surrender their assets. They were beaten in disciplinary sessions called catharsis. They signed blank documents and false confessions to be used as leverage. They were forbidden to leave. Jones held practice rituals he called white nights, in which the entire congregation pretended to commit mass suicide by drinking what was claimed to be poisoned punch. The punch was not poisoned. He was watching to see who hesitated. In 1977, after a New West magazine investigation began documenting the abuses, Jones moved 900 members to a clearing he had carved out of the jungle in Guyana, in northwestern South America. He called it Jonestown. The clearing was 3,800 acres. There was no road out except by tractor through the bush. The radio was controlled. The mail was opened. Members worked 12-hour days in the fields. They were given amphetamines to keep them awake and barbiturates to make them sleep. Loudspeakers in the trees played Jones's voice for sometimes 18 hours a day, lecturing on socialism, on betrayal, on the coming attack from the United States government. He had stopped sleeping. He was using methamphetamine. He had a tropical fungal infection that was eating into his face. Congressman Leo Ryan of California flew to Guyana on November 14, 1978, to investigate constituent complaints. He brought NBC reporters and a small group of journalists. He arrived at Jonestown on November 17th. Some members slipped him a note asking to leave. Ryan agreed to evacuate them. On November 18th, at the Port Kaituma airstrip 6 miles from Jonestown, gunmen sent by Jones opened fire on the departing group. Ryan was killed. 3 journalists were killed. A defector was killed. 10 others were wounded. 6 hours later, at the Jonestown Pavilion, Jones called the residents together. The recording survives. It is held in the FBI archive as cassette Q042. It runs 44 minutes. It begins with Jones telling the community that the airstrip killings have happened and that the only dignified response is what he calls revolutionary suicide. Mothers are instructed to administer cyanide first to their children. The poison is mixed with grape flavor aid in metal vats. Vitamin C and Valium are added to mask the taste. Some members protest. A woman named Christine Miller argues with Jones from the floor for several minutes that the children deserve to live. She is shouted down by other members. The injections begin with the infants. The cyanide kills in approximately 5 minutes by destroying the body's ability to use oxygen at the cellular level. The first 12 minutes of the tape are dominated by the sound of children screaming. Then the screams stop. Adults walk forward. Some drink. Some are injected by temple nurses with syringes. Some are shot when they try to flee. Jones can be heard urging haste. The recording ends mid-sentence as he tells the survivors to lay down their lives with dignity. When the Guyana Defense Force reached Jonestown the next morning, they found 909 bodies. 304 were children under the age of 17. The youngest was an infant of less than 1 year. Jones was found on the pavilion stage with a single gunshot wound to the right temple. The autopsy was inconclusive on whether he pulled the trigger himself or was shot by his head nurse Annie Moore, who was found dead beside him with a similar wound and a pistol nearby. The bodies were so numerous and the heat so severe that American military teams flying them out described the operation as the largest single-incident loss of American civilian life until September 11, 2001. Jones called it revolutionary suicide. The FBI evidence catalog calls it Q042. The first 12 minutes of that tape are children crying. 6 prophets, 6 closed rooms, 1 pattern. Marshall Applewhite told his followers a comet was a spaceship. Joseph DeMambro told his followers Sirius was a destination. Credonia Mwerinde told her followers the Virgin Mary wanted a locked church. Shoko Asahara told his physicists the apocalypse was a duty. David Koresh told his children they would meet him in the kingdom. Jim Jones told his community that revolutionary suicide was an act of love. The mechanisms differed: the bag, the fire, the gas, the bullet, the cup. The doctrine differed: the vehicle, the star, the seal, the levitation, the kingdom, the revolution. The pattern did not differ. A cult is not a faith. A cult is a closed system in which one voice has no opponent. The lesson of these 1,840 deaths is not to mistrust religion. The lesson is to never surrender the right to ask a question inside any group you belong to. The moment that question becomes forbidden, the group has already begun to die. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes it takes one afternoon in November. The sermon was always paradise. The exit was always a bag, a fire, a cup. And the tape, Q042, the death tape, the last 44 minutes of Jonestown, the tape always ends mid-sentence.